In this moment, following a time of great upheaval for the U.S. education system, our children need our unshakable support and belief in their potential more than ever. We at Presence are innovators in special education and mental health service delivery. We're coming together with visionary leaders to share ideas on transforming the paradigm and how we can address the challenges facing our children. Dr. Barbara Jenkins has been dedicated to serving the diverse needs of students for over 30 years. She's a chief in residence and leads the Chiefs for Change Women in Leadership Initiative. Barbara, I'm so glad to be speaking with you today.
Pleasure's mine.
I'd love to kick the conversation off with the current state of school districts today. Zooming in a bit, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges facing our education leaders?
I think the biggest really has to do with student learning and unfinished learning that we are still managing since the pandemic. The bottom line is what happened during the pandemic interrupted our educational efforts for our children. Now, there were issues and concerns to begin with, but they were exacerbated during the pandemic. That's number one. And then we have concerns around the funding as ESSER comes to a close and concerns of whether or not there'll be additional funds to help our young people because we've not cured what happened during the pandemic.
Can I double click into that notion of learning loss? What's the impact of learning loss overall?
Well, what we know from the data is that both in math and in English language arts, children suffered in achievement. What we also know is that in large urban districts especially, those children from minority populations and children that are traditionally underserved due to socioeconomic challenges suffered at a greater level than other children. And then we also know our children with special needs suffered some loss during that period that are hard to overcome at this point.
Something that's been emphasized over the last few years is really the importance of nurturing the whole child. You can't improve student academic success without really supporting their whole well-being. What lessons have you learned coming out of the pandemic?
What we learned after the pandemic was that our children had tremendous social and emotional needs, behavioral needs, if you will, that were just increased during that period of absence. I don't think we will know for some years what the actual impact of the pandemic was on our young people. What we do know is we see increased behaviors and increased needs for support. We use some of our ESSER dollars to provide additional mental health support, counselors, individuals who could help our children with behaviors and help them overcome some of those issues that they were dealing with. The sad thing is, while there were dollars available, the actual resources, the actual bodies were not available all across this country. There were not enough counselors available. And so those challenges continue in K-12. I think you will find more and more there's a need for some alternative solutions other than having enough counselors and bodies in place, which is what makes me so excited about companies like Presence and others who are doing innovative things to provide those services.
Staff shortages continue to plague schools across the country. What are some of the effective strategies and solutions that you think schools have explored and that you've seen be effective?
The staff shortages have not gone away. Whether it's occupational therapy, physical therapy, psychological services, mental health counseling, and in many instances, even tutoring, we have to explore the ability to do that through technology. And our children are very comfortable with it. After the pandemic, our parents are comfortable as well that some of those services can be provided through the innovation of technology. Students are very comfortable with receiving their services through technology because they are digital natives. I don't know that we will, in the near future, find solutions to the pipeline shortages. And so we have to be creative around the use of technology to expand and multiply the ability to provide those services. One teacher, one FTE can provide services to more students through the magic of technology. But here's what gives me hope. There are such talented individuals. That pipeline starts from great classroom teachers to principals, moving on up into the cabinet level, and those who are ready to be superintendents. And they are more than enthusiastic about having an opportunity to make a difference. There are three organizations that I particularly ascribe to that really are committed to developing future superintendents and leaders in public K-12. Chiefs for Change has a Future Chiefs program, as well as a Women in Leadership program that is committed to preparing future leaders. Council of Great City Schools has a new initiative called the Casserly Institute, and they are preparing future superintendents, especially for large urban districts. The Broad program at Yale University, they are as well committed to preparing future leaders of our K-12 educational system. And so I have hope because I see that pipeline cultivating future leaders with great precision.
I think that's something that we are so aware of at Presence. We're a teletherapy company, and the ability to provide more access, more pipeline to trained clinicians who are ready and willing to serve students. Speech language pathology, you mentioned the other services, OT, mental health, there's so much there.
I cannot stress what the pandemic did for us is it made it very comfortable, even expected, that we would receive and provide services through technology. What used to be unheard of in some districts became the norm. When schools were closed, we had to use technology in order to provide services to our children. So the comfort level did increase, both for our staff and for our parents and for families. I think our young people were comfortable all along, but the pandemic forced both parents and teachers and staff to use technology to provide those services.
With the major increase in IEPs that we're seeing, walk us through some of the key hurdles that we know districts are experiencing in serving our special education students.
The exponential increase in the population of our students with special needs is due to a couple of reasons. I think we're more adept at identifying earlier the needs of our children so that services can be provided. I also think parent advocacy has increased so that parents are more accustomed to looking at their child's needs and researching and coming to the school as a partner to make sure those needs are met. Again, the increase in the needs is impacted by the lack of available services and service providers. And so if you have more students needing speech therapy, for example, and one speech pathologist assigned to your school, you're going to be stretching that resource. As you can imagine, the backlog of students needing services gets to be pretty significant in any school. Consider psychological services, for example. If there's an assessment that is due, I can guarantee you that a school has a backlog, a wait list, if you will, of students waiting for those services to be provided. And that kind of issue has to be supplemented through other means than a single school psychologist being assigned to a school and coming once a week.
We're a teletherapy company. We provide both assessments and special education and mental health services to schools all over the country. How do you see teletherapy being useful for schools?
I don't think teletherapy is only useful. I think it is critical because there is no way to provide the services needed. We're losing time in travel time. We're losing time in the efficiency of scheduling at the school site. It just will not improve unless we take advantage of technology. The minutes saved through travel alone are significant, but the efficiency around someone who is in their office, at their home office, if you will, and able to diagnose and work specifically with individual students and move from file to file to file and not wait for the child to show up and wait for the parent to come in for a meeting or a session is going to be astronomical. And I think there is no other solution in recent history that has been successful.
From your experience, Barbara, what really are the main barriers to schools adapting technology-based solutions?
So if you consider school boards and leadership teams, they are just accustomed to and probably still subscribe to this notion that in-person is the only means by which services should be provided. We have to admit that the bodies don't exist. There's not going to be this tremendous bursting pipeline of more bodies next year to cover those vacancies. And so I think we have to make believers, or we had to make believers out of some of the adults that were veterans in K-12 education and just determined that we could get around this notion of not having enough staff available. I think that's turning now because we had to admit it. The bodies didn't miraculously show up. We still have staff shortages. And for the foreseeable future, it will not change. And so I think that's probably a good thing that we will move on toward more creative solutions.
Dr. Jenkins, we know that we're approaching the end of ESSER funds. How do you think schools should be considering ensuring that they're able to continue to sustain and maintain some of the new and innovative programs that they've introduced to students?
Well, the bad news is that the ESSER funding is running out. Schools have known this for some time. Districts have been making preparations for it. The good news is there are some efficiencies that can help schools continue some of those services. It is much more economically efficient, if you will, for districts to use teleservices. And so I think there's an opportunity to be more efficient with limited resources through the use of teleservices. And I think you'll see that being explored more and more by districts because the dollars are going away. We're also certainly hopeful that there'll be provision by the federal government that might increase those resources. But in the meantime, we have to be extremely efficient with what's available. And teletherapy and telehealth and services that are provided through technology help to stretch limited dollars.
You, of course, are an early adopter. I'd love your thoughts on AI and its application in the classroom.
I think it has the ability, the potential to transform K 12 education as we know it. But I want to think of it as a tool for teachers, not as a replacement for teachers, but a tool for teachers and really a means of multiplying exponentially good practices of individual teachers to serve more students. And it has to be our future, or we will get run over by that train.
Why do you think more schools should embrace technology-based solutions?
Schools should embrace the use of technology to provide student services because it is the only means we have available to overcome the shortages of staff and provide individualized services with precision.
What would be your call to action to schools as it relates to exploring new and innovative solutions to some of their biggest challenges?
I think the call to action is simple. If K 12 education is not only to survive, but thrive, we have to pursue new and innovative ways of providing services.
Describe why you're hopeful for our children's future.
Commitment, innovation, resilience. Commitment because I believe there are adults involved who are absolutely committed to the success of our young people. School boards, superintendents, principals, support staff, teachers who are committed. Innovation. There is no way for K 12 education to survive without innovation. Technology, research, creative, and best practices are all going to be critical to the future of K 12 education. And then resilience, because I absolutely believe in our young people.
The Visionary Voices video series convenes veteran education leaders and experts to explore promising new instructional approaches and ways to reimagine a future where every child can thrive. Follow along for thought-provoking conversations and discover real actionable insights that will empower us to build a new health and education system, one that really puts the whole child development at the forefront.